Hey everybody, it's Mike here from The Art of Guitar. Believe it or not, I've never watched the Some Kind of Monster documentary all the way through. I've seen parts of it back in the day. I skimmed through it, and I've seen clips online, especially the clip with Dave Mustaine and Lars Ulrich meeting together, those kind of highlights from the documentary. But for some reason, I just never felt the urge to want to watch it all the way through. I think it's because they're going through such a tough time, and I knew this was like some of their lowest moments, that it's hard to watch as a fan and someone who really loves the band. It's like watching someone in your family go through their worst times on film. And as I was watching it, I started to take notes, and I just wanted to write down all the thoughts, revelations, things I hated, things I loved. And I thought it would be a fun video for me to skip around the documentary a little bit and share with you what I was thinking as I was watching it. I recommend that if you've already seen Some Kind of Monster, go ahead and proceed with this video. But if you haven't, it's a really good idea to watch it at least once. And then when you watch my take on everything, you'll have some reference points, because I'm not going to be playing the entire documentary through, a lot of copyright reasons. So go ahead and check out the original documentary first, and then come back to my video and see if we share the same thoughts. So to start off, right off the bat, I'm feeling a little bit awkward watching some of the first couple scenes where they're playing the album for the first time for a select group of people in a room. And I don't know if it's just because they all look kind of uncomfortable, or they look kind of mad, some of them, like the guy in the Misfits shirt. It just kind of seems like they're not liking it. And I'm feeling, the same kind of feelings that I felt the first time I heard that album. Confusion, basically. Oh, they mentioned the Napster lawsuit, and I forgot that that was part of them hitting their lowest point. Like Lars went after Napster, and then everybody saw Metallica and Lars Ulrich as real greedy, so the public opinion on the band was pretty low at the time. And, I want to do another video on that in the future, because I feel like it's coming full circle now.
I think everybody understands the concept of trusting instincts.
Oh, the therapist. Okay, so he's going to come up a lot in this video just because he's in the entire documentary, and he kind of drives me crazy. And I don't think I'm alone in that opinion. I think a lot of people are going to be able to relate to what I say when I mention him.
Getting to a place where you don't let egos and let stuff get in the way of artistic expression, So, do you want to say anything more about that? Because, I think everybody understands.
I kind of wish they would have got Tony Robbins. I think that would have been way more exciting.
When we were talking a couple of days ago about whether, if we wanted to do this film or not, I was wondering if having these guys in here would affect that.
I did a video about the Beatles Get Back documentary, and watching that took 8 hours, and I did it 3 times for the video that I made. So watching this, went by really easy. But I realized there were a ton of parallels between the two documentaries. And one of them is that they're worried that the creative process might be hindered by a bunch of cameras and boom mics being around them all the time. And Paul McCartney said the same thing. How can you be creative when it feels like someone's looking over your shoulder the whole time? And I always wondered what Let It Be and what Saint Anger would have been like if they didn't have this whole production team around them the entire time. But I guess we'll never know.
And not bringing a riff, not bringing a song, not bringing a title, nothing.
Me and James did not meet somewhere else and come in here with material, with songs, with music.
This time, we all got in a room and just started playing.
This might sound bad, but I'm not a huge fan of that process. Just everybody get together and see what happens. Whatever they did, Justice for All, Master of Puppets, Ride the Lightning, keep doing that. That's just a fan, a fan like me. That's my opinion, because I just love that stuff, obviously. But it seems like whenever the creative license gets opened up to everybody, sometimes you get kind of a lowest common denominator when it comes to riffs, because everybody has to agree.
It is kind of strange being, like a famous guy, This is part of me that's trying to be unfamous, I guess. But it's also go against the rules attitude.
I have to laugh because James is kind of talking about not loving being famous all the time. But the second he gets pulled over, I have a funny feeling he has that don't you know who I am card right off the bat. If the cop is a Metallica fan, he's not going to give him a ticket. So
Basically, stopped doing the drugs that I was doing and cut way back on my drinking. Can't surf when you're hungover. You can't surf if you've been up all night. Well, at least I can't.
That's really good advice, by the way. I'm learning this too. If you have problems with drinking or anything else, if you do other things that, are counter to the drinking or the drugs or whatever, it's such a great way to get over your habits. Back when I did Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu a lot, I couldn't drink a lot because if you wake up and you're hungover, you're not going to want to go to class like that. You just, put yourself through some torture.
About his lyrics, therefore he couldn't talk about your drumming.
Right.
Do you know what I mean? And you and him did the solos, so you weren't allowed to comment on the solos. Do you know what I mean? There was rules. Are you telling me that those boundaries are gone now?
Seems like Bob Rock is a little bit surprised, but also excited about how they're going to do the songwriting process for this album. I wonder if he's, is excited because he can have a lot more say in what they do as well. I'm not really sure. But I already said how I felt about it, but it's kind of interesting to see him get told that for the first time and his reaction to the fact that they're going to let everybody, in the kitchen, basically.
Some kind of monster. Some kind of monster? Some kind of monster.
It is.
You know what I mean?
I really love when someone gets an idea and it's captured on, video, and you can go back and watch the inception of it. Just like in the Beatles documentary, which I said I'll be talking about a lot today, the parallels of that would be when Paul's sitting there and all of a sudden he starts playing a blues riff, and Get Back, the song, basically comes out of him, and you could watch him write it on the spot. Here we get to see James come up with the title, Some Kind of Monster.
Excellent.
That part's a lot like the Beatles documentary where Linda showed up and she brought her daughter, and of course Yoko was always there, and so it always seemed like there was a little bit of a distraction when it came to the family showing up. But it's cool that they made time for that. Recording can be a long process, and it's got to be nice to be able to see your family. But think of how far Metallica has come over the years. Imagine Kill 'Em All Metallica with kids on the couch while they're recording.
Last night, because I was kind of still wired from it all.
It always sucks when somebody's not on the same page as the rest of the band, and in this case, you could tell everybody's excited about the new writing process. Kirk said that he couldn't even get to sleep because he was excited, and then they show James. I know it's all edited a certain way to make it look dramatic, but James does not look like he's having a good time, and he's struggling with a lot of things at this point, but just to watch him kind of, in his own world while everybody else is having a great time is kind of sad to see.
Sucks my soul. Temptation feel no
It had to have been really strange to all of a sudden be tuned down so low and have these nu metal type parameters around you when you're trying to create. And James just doesn't seem like he's in his element. While he's trying to create some vocal lines and riffs, it just seems like they're trying to paint a picture with somebody else's color palette.
Filled with many, many things, and music is just one of the things.
Say bye, James.
Bye, James.
Bye, buddy.
I chose not to have children and do those kind of things. My music, that's my children, I actually said, I think, that this is really lame and weak.
That seemed like a really honest moment with Jason Newsted. First of all, talking about how everybody suddenly has kids and, all these other things going on. But his kids are his music and his songs. So I could relate to that because everyone else in my band has been married, has kids and all that. But for me, it's always been about guitar and music. So in a weird way, I just kind of connected with Jason right there. And then he talked about how he thought it was really lame that they had to bring in a therapist just to talk to each other.
I learned how to love things was just to choke them to death. Don't go anywhere. Don't leave.
That's such a huge thing to realize and to admit. But the problem is after you know that you're like that, what do you do about it? How do you fix that?
Was something for me. And then if I don't like it or don't 100% embrace it, then I'm just being a selfish, insular asshole.
Yeah, it's a fear response.
This scene made me wonder that if instead of talking to a therapist to work their differences out, if they all just got in a room and channeled it through the music to try to heal, if that would have resulted in better music, or if it would have resulted in them all killing each other.
That was totally weird for me.
You hear that, Bob?
Why don't you try getting a more solid beat?
Regular?
Oh, well, you can call it regular.
Here we have a great scene. Lars is trying to be more progressive, if you will, and do some tricky things on the drums. But if you think how Metallica has been since the Black Album, it's been pretty groove-heavy, straightforward music. And, you know, they're already changing things up with their songwriting process, so maybe Lars is like, maybe I'll just try to throw the beat off, maybe I'll try to do like something Mike Portnoy would do, just something weird. And the rest of the band is not digging it. And I thought that was crazy to see the clash of opinions during that part.
Yeah. Do we have to do that? Can we sack Phil?
James is already talking about firing Phil the therapist. And I wonder if he was getting the same vibes I am. You know, maybe we don't need him. Maybe there's other ways to, you know, get this album out without killing each other. But yeah, it didn't work. I think Lars is too much in the Phil camp for that to happen at this point.
I mean, I don't see what it does to it.
I think that's how you hear it, dude. I mean, that's fine. I'm just trying to do something different.
To me, that's the kiss of death to a lot of musicians and artists when they try to do something different. Like I said earlier, Lars is just, you know, looking at new ways of doing things. But when you go out of your way to try to be different, it usually doesn't end up the greatest. It almost seems like it has to come organically. Now things are about to hit the fan, so hold on.
You should play with what Kirk's doing, and I'm telling you it's stock.
Dude, fine. You know what, guys? Why don't we just go in there and just hammer it out, all right? Instead of hammering on each other.
Right. And what are you trying to do?
I'm not trying to do shit. You're just sitting here being a complete dick.
I love Kirk because he is the peacemaker. I always thought Metallica is really balanced because you have James, who's like the father figure. You have Lars, who acts as kind of the mother figure. If you watch him long enough, you can kind of see that dynamic between the two. And then Kirk ends up being like the only child now that Jason's gone. And he's trying to keep the peace. He's trying to keep the parents from divorcing. And his attempts fall flat because, you know, right now they're in the heat of this argument. And I was getting a little bit nervous, actually, because James getting more and more aggravated is kind of scary. Yeah, that's freaky. It's kind of hard to take James too seriously, though, when he's wearing overalls for some reason. But, man, when he slams that door, that was intense. I was waiting for, you know, there to be a crack right down the middle after he slammed it.
Beatles, the Rolling Stones, you know, and all of that inspired some of the British rock music that then developed after that. And
Kind of sad to see Torben this close to when he passed away recently. When he showed up on the screen, I was like, oh yeah, this guy, he's like a wise old wizard or something. He looks like one, you know, he has like a wooden walking stick, and he always seems to be very wise in what he talks about. Here I was kind of worried about him because they're sitting here talking and Torben's back there like hunched over. Now they go back to the studio where Lars is going to show his dad, Torben, some of their new material, and check out his response.
I would say, you know, if you said, if you were our advisor, what would you say? Then I would say, delete that. You know?
Talk about blunt honesty. You know, I think a band like Metallica could use that advice just because they're so huge and everybody loves them. It's probably hard for people to give their honest opinions to them. So to have Lars's dad be the one to do that, I think is a great idea because they know and trust him.
Don't do that. Then we are the co-producers of the process slipping off the planet.
What is it? The unraveling of a band? And then there were two?
That's so weird because in the Beatles documentary, Paul McCartney says the same thing.
And then there were two.
And didn't it seem like Phil, the therapist, was kind of winging it when he was talking?
Then we are the co-producers of the process slipping off the planet.
And keep in mind that they're paying him $40,000 a month to be their band therapist. Now, when they flashed to the Moscow concert, everything felt right in the world again to me. I think it's because they're tuned standard in this part and they're rocking a familiar song. The rest of the documentary, they're in really low tuning and it just doesn't feel like the Metallica frequency.
Everything that you guys do and you touch turn to gold, and everything I do fucking backfire.
It's so weird to hear Dave talk like that about himself. You know, everything I do backfires. You got to think Rust in Peace is a metal masterpiece. But, you know, in comparison to everything Metallica does, of course, it's going to be overshadowed. But man, to say that it backfires, that's kind of harsh. I think it's really cool that they captured this, but I really think it would have been better for them if maybe they would have done what the Beatles did and just hide a microphone in the room and capture it that way.
I don't know. I just, all of a sudden, this became like such a big production. I don't understand.
Isn't it kind of weird to see Lars being jealous about Jason's new band, Echo Brain? I thought that was weird that even if you're in Metallica, the biggest band ever, you could still feel those feelings of, oh man, he's moved on.
So we just have to find that if the movie will be as intense,
It's good to see James Hetfield back. Looks like he has a new haircut. He looks healthier. He's got some new glasses going on. But the first thing you see is Phil sitting there. So I wonder if James was happy that happened or if he's like, oh man, I was hoping you'd get rid of him by now. Yeah, that look James gives Phil at the end there, man, it said everything. As they're jamming, it's got to be cool after a year of, trying to get clean and all that. James comes back and they're jamming in a circle, but it's still weird to see Bob Rock sitting there. It almost reminds me when like somebody's uncle shows up to band practice and just wants to sit in for a song. That's just what he looks like sitting in the corner there.
It's going to be interesting working on the schedule because we really haven't. It's going to be great.
And kind of the overview is, the less time we have here, the more productive we'll be, in a way,
Another Beatles parallel. When James comes back and says he can only work from noon to 4, he's setting up brand new boundaries for everybody. It's like putting everybody on a schedule. And up until now, it seemed like a lot of chaos going on. I'm not sure if they were getting a lot done with what they had, according to what James is talking about. But if you say we only have this window to work within, you feel like a lot of people are going to come together and work a lot harder within that time frame. The Beatles had to actually set a schedule because Paul McCartney said that things just felt, too loose.
You know any lyric ideas?
I'm searching for
Searching for donuts.
Seeing that Pro Tools screen right there brought back a lot of nostalgia for me. That's like old school Pro Tools. It's kind of weird though to see Metallica writing and having, things looped on a computer. Part of me wishes they could go back to the Black Album days. I know it's a headache to work with tape and all that kind of stuff, but they really came out with some really great stuff back in the tape days. Now with Pro Tools, things are really easy to loop, to copy and paste, and I just don't know if it results in a better product.
Things get talked about and then decisions are made, and I feel I walk into something that's already kind of decided, and it's a total uphill battle for me a lot of times. I don't like that feeling.
Oh, that's just like the last 15 years.
Yeah.
For me.
Well, let's talk about.
That's the best part. Kirk just zinged everybody right there by saying that.
Just save up the tension. Seriously, I mean, it's okay because it's going to. Tension produces results. It gets it.
Well, James left pissed off again and slammed the door, but this time he leaves on a sweet, sweet motorcycle.
It's the same, man. I wake up the next day somewhere in some bed. I don't know who this person is next to me, and I'm drunk, completely hungover, and have a show to do. And the result is the same. When life now is pretty exciting. You don't know what's going to happen when you're kind of clear and here and in the now.
I was thinking James isn't really selling this too well when he talks about he doesn't want to live like the old days anymore where you play a show, you get really drunk, you wake up next to somebody, and you get to play another show the next day. It's just like, it doesn't sound so bad. I'm just kidding.
Those two feel the best to me.
It's a tough one to decide. They all kind of got some charm, don't they?
Yeah, I'd be interested to hear the first one.
Now, this is exactly what I mean when I talk about too many cooks in the kitchen. So Bob plays a little section of the song, then they all feel like they have to agree on it in order to move on. And even Phil, the therapist, is, having his say. And Kirk's sitting there reading a magazine and he's throwing in his 2 cents. It just seems like I said, the lowest common denominator is what you get when everybody has to agree. Fuck! The whole scene leading up to Lars going up to James and screaming in his face is so interesting because you could see Lars pacing back and forth and he's just getting more and more upset. And the crescendo of that is him actually going up to James and screaming into his face. And I thought that was really dangerous. He's lucky James isn't drunk or in his old ways, because I bet you he would have got, a knuckle sandwich. Yeah! It was great to see them kind of let loose again and play some old classics with some people coming up to play bass, having bass auditions. And especially this Elena girl. She's doing a great job, and she looks up and the look on her face is priceless when she realizes she's actually playing with the band Metallica.
You think it's good? Was there anything in particular that you...
I wasn't paying attention to that detail. It's a lot of good stuff.
Once again, Lars and James feel like they're a couple who've just gotten in a fight, and Lars is, still pissed off, but he's just being aloof about everything now. He's just like, yeah, whatever, do whatever you want. And then when they show James, he's just like, what am I going to do with this guy? Of course, you also have Kirk, the scared child, who's just sitting there not knowing what to do either. Lars walking by and spitting and almost hitting a $20,000 microphone. Wow.
Of the guitar solo as we have known it, maybe being something that was a little outdated and maybe reintroducing some riff-a-rama things.
But can I say something that I think is bullshit?
Kirk's mannerisms say everything in this situation. So he's sitting there listening to Lars talk about getting rid of guitar solos, basically, for this album. And I just love that Kirk stood up for his solos, and he said something very profound. He was like, if we just chase a fad and we get rid of the guitar solos, that dates this album. So in trying to, not date us, you're dating us. I thought he was right about that.
Money. And walk away. This is stupid!
Sharpen that booger-picking finger and be the 50th.
Once again, this is an example of even if you have all the money in the world, you still have to do things you don't want to do. I think they're doing this as a favor to like a rock station, like a radio station or something. But to have all of them trying to do this, PSA for whatever it is, it just seems like they're being forced into it. So even though they're all multimillionaires, they're still doing things and hating it. So that makes a lot of us feel better.
Your back so you don't stab mine.
Well, that's a good line for a song.
Now, when James was talking about appeasing that radio station and doing those PSAs that he didn't want to do, he came up with a really clever line just out of nowhere. He said, wash your back so you don't stab mine. I thought that was really great, but I think the saying is actually scratch my back and I'll scratch yours. So maybe it should have been scratch my back so I won't stab yours. But who am I to say?
Or not. It sometimes is a distraction.
Now, speaking of who am I to say, Phil took it upon himself to try to write some lyrics for James, and I thought that was so hilarious. And then he hands it to James, and just the way, James reads it, and then he just turns around and starts rocking out like he never even saw it. I thought that was hilarious. Phil is starting to overstep his role here, and you could just tell he's wearing out his welcome.
You stand up!
That had to have felt great for Lars to scream the F word for 10 seconds straight like that. I think I'm going to try that tonight just to see how it feels.
How much work you put in and how much, it's just tough. Sometimes it's just tough work.
And I like to stretch the frontiers of what people accept, okay?
You could tell Bob Rock has had enough of Phil at this point. So Phil's trying to give him some, I don't want to say psychobabble because he's actually really intelligent and he says some great stuff. But he's trying to give him advice, it seems like, on how to finish an album, whereas Bob Rock has done it many times, and he's just like, sometimes it just takes hard work.
So, admission is believing. Oh, I guess I'm not going to be playing today then, huh?
So Phil goes off and he starts writing these messages to the band. It's almost like these inspirational quotes, and he's leaving them around the studio, which is kind of strange. It's almost like when you see a live, laugh, love sign or something hanging up on the wall. He's kind of doing that, but all over the studio.
We've had a fabulous few weeks with a lot of great productivity, a lot of really good stuff going on. The more we feel good about ourselves and each other, and the higher we ascend, the more challenging it will be to our psyches.
I understand it, I embrace it and all that stuff, but sometimes it just bugs me. I think that thing was kind of bugging me yesterday.
No, I'm glad to know it's how you feel.
Tall-hearted.
Uh-oh, Lars is starting to lose faith in Phil as well. So Bob Rock just basically said it right there. He's like, I'm kind of getting tired of all this stuff. And now you're hanging up signs with all his platitudes. It just seems like Phil's trying to justify his job. And as he's talking, it really does feel like he's just kind of winging it sometimes. He's really good at selling it, though, but it only goes so long. And then the band starts to catch on. And that seems to be what's happening here. It's like Phil's world is starting to crumble.
We've grown a lot, man. 3 guys in this band.
And last time, when we did this 14, 15 years ago,
I love seeing Robert there for the first time, knowing that he's eventually going to get in the band, but he just seems like he's so excited. Like, I can't believe I get a chance to try out for Metallica. Little does he know.
Your feeling, when you say those things.
Not that I want to break up what you guys are discussing if you want to go deeper, but I think what might be really good is to treat this with respect, go out and do this.
See, Bob is now being super pragmatic. He just saw the writing on the wall. He's like, if I don't just take charge and, make them work, it's never going to happen. If we just sit here and talk about how we feel all day, that's great. But it doesn't equal good music. So let's get out there and just frickin' put our noses to the grindstone. I think that's the saying. And let's grind.
I could try battery.
battery? You can play that fast with your fingers?
Yeah.
Imagine that you're trying out for the bass part of Metallica, and they ask you what you want to play, and the first thing you say with complete confidence is battery. It was hard for me to believe that a professional like Twiggy would play that intro to For Whom the Bell Tolls a half step off like that. Seems really weird for someone at that level to mess up such a well-known Metallica song. Such a beloved part too because of Cliff.
Afterwards, when he played it alone with his finger, it hadn't been played that way since Cliff. It's just like...
See, Kirk brought up Cliff, and you really have to honor Cliff when you're trying out for Metallica, obviously. So if you're playing one of the most iconic Cliff parts a half step off, I can see why that didn't work out with Twiggy. It's also funny how amazed the band is at Robert's technique, because Robert's got that flamenco way of playing. He even played some crazy nylon string guitar solo for them one time. It sounded awesome. But his ability with his fingers is top notch. I love when Lars makes his impression of it. He's like, blah, blah, blah. If you play it over and over again, it gets funnier each time.
To show you how serious we are about this, offer you $1 million to join our band right now.
It's an advance. It's an advance on some percentage you're going to be making with the band. This is what life can hold for me. Wow. With my new family.
You could tell that Kirk wanted Robert in the band really bad. He just looks so happy. Once again, I would love to flash back to Kill 'Em All or Ride the Lightning days and just show Lars this clip of him offering $1 million to Robert to join the band. It would just seem like parody, I bet, to him. He'd be like, oh yeah, like as if we're going to be able to give somebody $1 million someday. It's also great to see Robert, and I think this is his apartment, jumping around and stuff. He's in this like little tiny space knowing what's in store for him coming up. It's so cool to see somebody go from rags to riches like that, especially a guy who seems like such a cool dude. I was not aware of this. This surprised me. I didn't know that Jason Newsted played like one tour with Ozzy. It's really crazy how they switch places like that.
When I heard that you guys were moving here and all of that, that brought up a lot of fear around, wow, what is Phil's perception of, his, longevity with Metallica,
If the client, either James or us, says, then I really think that needs to be respected.
Here we have James essentially breaking up with Phil. And Phil knew it was coming, so he was deflecting it a little bit with what he was saying, his comebacks, his responses. And Lars just kind of lost it right there. He was just like, hey, if the client says they want timeout, it's timeout. You can't talk your way out of this.
You get 32 votes, you get 5 votes in any vote, okay?
But this doesn't mean anything.
I think it's crap.
I think in the spirit of what we're trying to do, we got to do 25, and then Q Prime's the tiebreaker.
That works. That's fine. Cool.
So you can hate on Lars as much as you want, but you have to admit he's being the opposite of greedy right here. A lot of people thought he was greedy with the Napster stuff, but they're instantly giving Robert a quarter of the say, which is crazy because he just joined.
Romantic is a better album title. Like it's more about the record.
Everybody seems to be agreeing that Saint Anger should be the name of the album, but Lars is the, odd man out saying, no, I think it should be Frantic. What this reminds me of is when the Black Album first came out, everybody said Enter Sandman should be the first single. But Lars is like, no, I think I could picture Holier Than Thou being the first big hit. And I'm glad they went with Enter Sandman, and I'm also glad they went with Saint Anger in this case.
Allowed us to build what we built, with guidance.
I really appreciate your bringing this forward.
I thought this was a real touching moment because even though James was against Phil for most of the documentary, I mean, right off the bat, he was talking about firing him right away. But over time, I think James realized that Phil did bring a perspective into the band that was needed at the time. And even though they're going to go their separate ways, he's appreciating him. And it was just a cool thing to have James break down and say that. And James was also like, I don't want this to end. I feel like, I'm going to lose all you guys now, which is really sad because the rest of the documentary, he seems like he's trying to get away from everybody. But now that everything's good, he wants to stay there and keep going. I thought that was great. Think of the thousands of shows that James has played, and he still gets nervous. I didn't really realize that he warms his voice up with that Good, the Bad, and the Ugly soundtrack. And it must be really cool to be James's guitar tech, the guy who hands him his guitar and then fist bumps him. That's got to be really cool to be part of James's relaxation process. Like, hey man, you got this. It's got to be such a great job. I think that sign that fan was holding says it all. Metallica, thank you for existing. Sometimes I have to remind myself that I should just be happy they're still around. Even if I don't love Saint Anger, it's not on the top list of my favorite Metallica albums, I'm still happy that they're just here, period. That's such a Rocky moment when Robert lifts his arm like that, or a Breakfast Club moment. I love those. That feeling of walking out onto the stage, that is something I've experienced many times. Not to this degree, obviously. But man, just the rush. It's like all the work we've done all this time. Here we go. It's time to just do it for real. Go! When Robert starts doing his braid whipping like that, a thought came to me. I thought, I wonder if Jason Newsted is in the crowd here. And he's feeling that same feeling that Lars and Kirk felt when they went and saw Echo Brain play live. All right, so those are all my thoughts, all 1,000 of them, or however many that was, about Some Kind of Monster. Overall, I'm glad I watched the whole thing. There were times when I felt really dreadful, because it's just hard to watch, like I said, people who you really care about, even though I don't know them, I feel like they're part of my family or something, struggling so much and almost breaking up. But in the end, they came together, and they're still together to this day, so... Okay, everyone, thanks again for watching. My throat is just toast right now. It's a lot of talking. Thanks again. Bye-bye.